Want to come on and talk about my favorite sheriff in the Halloween franchise, Sheriff Ben Meeker. Somebody who I think is a very underrated cop or sheriff, whatever you want to call him, in all of horror, actually. Usually kind of plays out where, the hero, the main character, the protagonist, whatever, comes up and, knows what's going on ahead of law enforcement, knows that the villain's coming, knows that the villain's making moves, the monster, whatever the case is. And, usually if the main character's not the sheriff, then, the sheriff's natural reaction is to kind of, have some pushback and tell them, oh, calm down, you don't know, we haven't seen any signs of what you're talking about happening, there's no reason to panic, Worst case scenario is like Friday 13th Part 6 when the sheriff in that movie, Sheriff Garris, I believe is his name, was telling Tommy, like, Jason's been dead for years, Crystal Lake's fine, nothing to worry about, and it's just from that all the way to actually locking Tommy up and accusing him of being the killer, just basically recreating the killings and not trusting him at all, right? Treating him like a copycat killer or whatever. That's the worst case scenario. But more often than not, it's that they don't trust, the civilian telling them what's going on and how to do their job, right? Which is somewhat understandable, but not completely. I mean, they have to do their job. They have to investigate. Kind of like the middle ground would be sort of how what Brackett does in Halloween 78, where he's listening to Loomis, he's hearing him, as says, what do we do? What's the best move? And Loomis tells him, well, you just, lay low, keep your eyes and ears open, and, wait for signs of, Michael's activity to give him away, and then we'll make a move. Don't get too excited. But at least he's listening, but he doesn't really believe him until the end of the movie, right? In fact, he doesn't even show up at the end, as Loomis saves the day, but there's not, even into Halloween 2, right? He's kind of playing it as, well, you didn't really shoot him 6 times, you missed him or whatever. That kind of thing. He doesn't totally believe him until it's too late. Halloween 4, though, Loomis shows up, comes into the police station, says, hey, I've been tracking Michael, all the way back from where they had him in Halloween 4. Can't remember if it's Smith Grove or some other place, but initially, Meeker's like, hey, look, he's been locked up for 10 years, he's been in a coma, he doesn't even know who Jamie Lloyd is, right? There's no reason to panic. But very quickly, when they try to make the call through, and the deputies tell them that the power lines have been cut, and Loomis is going, Sheriff, 6 bodies from here to Ridgemont. A filling station in flames. Michael Myers is here in this town, right? He kind of, he's very convincing, and Meeker's like, okay, well, this guy obviously has seen some shit. I'm gonna pay attention. He doesn't really totally believe him yet, but he's gonna listen to him. He gives him the time of day. And then once they drive off to the Carruthers house, they see the dead dog, and then, he's like, oh, this is starting to spook me, Doc. Like, he kind of, he comes around pretty quickly to believing in Loomis and trusting Loomis's judgment and, shifting into more of a mindset of, all right, so what do we do? How do we handle this kind of thing? And then they go back to the police station right after that, and, all his deputies are killed. They don't really show how many bodies there are, but he knows, okay, this is basically, that's when he kind of knows, like, okay, well, forces of hell have been unleashed on his town, and Loomis has been right all along, and trust him and do whatever you can to protect whoever, he's still been right, and it's time to start taking action and going on the hunt, right? So, I mean, that's pretty refreshing, and he was written that way, right? The writer of the movie, and he was written that way as a character on purpose. Alan B. McElroy, I've heard in interviews saying he's kind of frustrated how the law enforcement, the sheriff of the town, the police chief, whoever, never believes the main character, and he kind of wanted to do something original this time. when he was writing the screenplay for Halloween 4 to say, look, Meeker's gonna buy into what Loomis is selling him pretty early. And it just makes sense, because I mean that's his job. Like, that's should be his reaction. Sure, he's going to have a little bit of a skepticism. Like, yeah, the guy's been he hasn't dealt with Michael directly. He doesn't understand Michael the way Loomis does. So he's going to be like, well, the guy's been in a coma. He was shot to shit 10 years before. How is he even functioning? Fine. But he knows Loomis. He knows what Loomis has gone through, and he knows that he wouldn't be showing up all hysterical like he is unless he's dead ass that there's Michael's back and he's coming for your town. So he goes right into, well, let's find Jamie Lloyd, let's find Rachel, let's get them to safety, let's bore up the house. Don't even, his deputy's asking him, like, well, is this a little, is all this necessary? Is it a little excessive? And he goes, don't even ask me. If you saw the police station, you wouldn't even think of that, right? And he's a no bullshit kind of guy. That's what I like about him the most, is that he's not concerned with why or, how this is happening. He's just like, okay, let's just deal with protecting the kids, getting through the night, right? And that's exactly what you need. So from that perspective, he got them to his house, boarded the windows up, which ended up like kind of trapping them in the end. But overall, what he did, got them off the streets, was very proactive, and made him effective as a sheriff, right? He's not just a guy who shows up too late, gets killed, wastes everybody's time, didn't do his job, and was just fucking useless, like we see with a lot of movies. Where I would push back against him, though, where he kind of drops the ball a little bit, is when he actually leaves the house, when he's listening to the radio and he's hearing all this chaos is going on, and he's got rednecks running around his town and killing people by mistake. So he does leave them, and he does, leave his deputy in charge, who ends up getting killed, and leaves Rachel to man the radio, which, she's not really, not that she's not qualified. I mean, she just listens to a radio, but it's, she's just a scared teenage girl at this point. Why are you leaving her alone? Loomis takes off, I believe, before him. So you're stuck with one deputy, and he's leaving his daughter, the boyfriend, Rachel, and Jamie alone. Not a great move, but still, overall, he got them to safety. Even if they ended up having to flee the house in the end. And in the end, he shows up with the state troopers, and right away, doesn't even hesitate, blasts Michael, blows them all to shit, right? Buries them in the cemetery there. And yeah, I think overall he's one of the best sheriffs we've gotten. Again, you compare him to, like, in the new trilogy, that guy was a complete joke, right? Like, how he was still the sheriff in Halloween. How he was the sheriff in Halloween Ends after what happened in Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills is, like, obviously one of the biggest problems with that franchise as a plot point, but just absolutely fucking embarrassing how some of these guys handle situations in these movies. And it's part of the reason why, people think horror movies are stupid sometimes, because characters don't react how they're supposed to act. Like, it's just not in touch with reality. But when you have characters coming into your, a police station, and they're complaining, they're saying, there's a monster out there, it's aliens coming, or it's zombies, or whatever the hell is coming after them, or a guy who's supposed to be in a coma, for 10 years, how do you expect them to react? I mean, they're going to push back a little bit. But when they spend the whole movie arguing with the character after there's evidence starts stacking up, that, like, you need to start taking this seriously, and they just don't do it. And by the time they realize what's going on, it's too late, and they get killed. It happens over and over again. But with Meeker, he's pretty much right away, let's trust Loomis, do what he says, do what we can to get these kids to safety, and protect them, to survive the night. So anyways, I just think he needs to be kind of given more credit. I think he's a great character, and Halloween 4 is my favorite sequel in the Halloween franchise, and that's one of the reasons why. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are, and if there's anybody else that we need to talk about who's a great underrated sheriff or police chief in horror movies or movies in general, that hasn't doesn't really come up a lot, and let me know in your comments, and